Jack Morgan, 69, moved slowly down Harbor Point's sidewalk, his left leg stiff from old wounds. A faded navy cap shaded his silver hair, and his jacket's frayed cuffs spoke of years long past. Beside him, Ranger, a yellow Labrador in a service vest, walked in perfect step, glancing up at Jack with quiet loyalty. The Harbor Grill diner came into view, warm light spilling through its windows, the scent of fried clams drifting into the autumn air. Jack paused at the door, giving Ranger a gentle pat. "Let's give it a try," he murmured. Just then, a college kid rushed up with a tray of smoothies. The door nearly swung shut in his face until Jack caught it. "Here you go, son," Jack said. The young man blinked, grateful. "Thanks, sir." Inside, the diner hummed with life, families chatting, silverware clinking, the soft hum of a jukebox. Jack scanned the room and chose a booth near the window. He sat carefully, and Ranger slipped under the table, resting his chin across Jack's boot. The waitress placed water and a menu in front of him. Jack thanked her, though food wasn't what he came for. What he wanted was a quiet seat, a chance to feel part of the world again. Ranger's tail brushed softly against Jack's shoe, steady and reassuring. For the first time in days, Jack let himself breathe easier. Jack had just started to settle when the rhythm of the diner shifted. Footsteps approached, firm and deliberate. A man in a pressed white shirt, black apron, and a manager's badge stopped at his booth. His arms folded, his voice even but loud enough to carry. "Sir, we don't allow dogs inside." Jack lifted his eyes slowly. Ranger's head rose from under the table, ears twitching. "He's not just a dog," Jack replied, calm but steady. "He's my service partner." The manager shook his head. "Rules are rules. I'm going to have to ask you both to leave." For a moment, the diner hushed. A child at a nearby booth whispered, "Dad, isn't that a service dog?" The father shushed him quickly, eyes fixed on his plate. Across the room, a teenager tilted his phone, recording. Jack exhaled, fingers brushing the rim of his glass. Years of discipline steadied his voice. "Understood." He pushed back from the booth, rising with care. His stiff leg made the movement slow, but his back stayed straight. Ranger stood at once, leash taut, posture alert. Together, they turned toward the door. The room seemed to hold its breath. Conversations faltered, forks paused midair. A few diners looked away, uneasy, others watched openly, unsure. Ranger's paws clicked lightly against the floor, the only sound until the glass door swung open with a dull creak. Cold autumn air swept in as Jack stepped outside. Behind him, the diner's chatter resumed in fits and starts, but not with its earlier ease. On the sidewalk, Jack tightened his grip on the leash. Ranger leaned close, steady as ever. Jack gave him a faint nod. "We've been through worse, buddy." Ranger's tail tapped once against his leg, the quiet answer of a partner who never questioned. The glass door of Harbor Grill swung open with a sharp jingle. Heads turned as 5 Marines in dress blues stepped inside, their polished shoes striking the hardwood floor in unison. At their front walked Captain Daniel Brooks, tall and steady, his coat trimmed in red, brass buttons gleaming under the diner's lights. The hum of conversation faded to a hush. A man at the bar lowered his coffee. A child froze mid-bite, eyes wide. Even the waitress stopped with her tray balanced in hand. The manager, Mr. Dorsey, blinked at the sight and straightened. Can I help you?" Captain Brooks stepped forward, his voice clear but controlled. "We're looking for Jack Morgan and his service dog, Ranger." A ripple went through the room. Diners glanced at one another, whispers rising. The teenager with the phone shifted nervously, lowering his screen. They left," the manager stammered. "A moment ago, there was some confusion." Brooks cut him off by setting a framed photograph on the counter. In it, a younger Jack stood in desert gear, dust streaked across his face. At his side, Ranger, once without gray, wore a military harness, ears pricked and alert. "This man," Brooks said, his voice carrying to every corner of the diner, dragged 3 Marines out of an ambush when no one else could. His partner here saved lives equal to any medic. Together, they earned honors most soldiers only dream of. The silence deepened. A woman at a booth bowed her head, ashamed. The teenager shoved his phone into his pocket. One of the younger Marines stepped closer, his eyes fixed on the photograph. His voice broke the stillness. "That's him. He taught me at camp. I owe him my life." The manager's face drained of color. Around the room, no one moved, the weight of the words settling like a stone. Brooks lifted the photo, tucking it under his arm. His gaze lingered on the manager only long enough to add, "You didn't just turn away a customer. You turned away an American hero." Then he turned sharply, his unit following in perfect step. The door swung shut behind them, the bell's echo hanging in the quiet like judgment. Jack sat on a weathered bench across the street, the cool slats pressing through his jacket. Ranger rested at his feet, tail curled close, eyes steady on the man he'd served beside for years. Jack unwrapped a simple sandwich, breaking it neatly in half. Ranger waited until the quiet command came before taking his share. From the diner, the bell jingled again. Jack looked up. Captain Brooks and his Marines stepped into the autumn light, crossing the street in measured formation. Their polished shoes clicked against the pavement, drawing the eyes of passers-by. Ranger lifted his head, ears twitching. Jack placed a hand on the dog's back. Easy boy. The group stopped a few feet away. Brooks removed his cap with a nod. Mr. Morgan, sir, permission to join you? Jack shifted slightly, leaving space on the bench. Suit yourself, Brooks sat, the others fanning out. One crouched near Ranger, palm open. The dog sniffed cautiously, then gave a slow wag. We heard what happened inside, Brooks said, his tone softer now. Didn't sit right, Jack gave a faint huff. Didn't expect anyone to fuss. You never did, Brooks replied. He reached into his coat, producing a cloth bundle. Inside lay a unit coin, edges engraved with Bravo Company's insignia. He placed it in Jack's weathered hand. The men wanted you to have this. Jack traced the metal with his thumb, throat tightening. Ranger pressed closer, sensing the shift. One of the younger Marines cleared his throat. Sir, you pulled me out near Fallujah. I never got to say thank you. His eyes shone with quiet conviction. Jack studied him for a moment, then gave a short nod. Guess we both made it. Silence settled, not heavy but full. Around them, the town carried on, cars rolling by, leaves rustling along the curb. On the bench, a veteran, his dog, and a handful of Marines shared a moment stitched together by memory, loyalty, and respect. Back inside Harbor Grill, the atmosphere had shifted. Conversations no longer carried their earlier ease. Diners whispered in low tones, eyes drifting toward the door where the Marines had exited. The waitress set down her tray with a sigh, her hands trembling just enough to rattle the glasses. At one booth, an older woman with silver hair spoke up, her voice clear in the hush. My husband wore the uniform. He never asked for favors, only respect. Shame on you, Mr. Dorsey. The words landed hard. The manager flushed and looked away, but he couldn't escape the stares now fixed on him. A man at the bar muttered, Never thought I'd see the day a war hero gets tossed out while we sit here doing nothing. The teenager who had filmed Jack shifted uncomfortably, sliding his phone deeper into his pocket. His mother whispered something sharp, but he didn't meet her eyes. Across the diner, a child leaned against the booth and asked quietly, Why can't the dog stay? The question, simple and innocent, seemed to echo louder than any protest. The room felt unsettled, like a tide pulling back before a wave. Diners who had looked away earlier now exchanged guilty glances. No one picked up their conversations where they had left off. Outside the window, Jack sat with Ranger, the Marines gathered around him. The sight cut through the glass barrier, an old man, his loyal dog, and a circle of uniforms honoring him where the restaurant had failed. One by one, diners returned to their meals, but the ease was gone. Forks clinked against plates in awkward rhythm. Even Mr. Dorsey, standing stiff by the counter, seemed smaller than before. The bell above the door jingled again as a couple left early, their expressions tight with disapproval. Harbor Grill would not forget this afternoon, not soon, not easily. The sun had slipped lower, shadows stretching across the sidewalk where Jack and Ranger still sat. The Marines lingered nearby, trading quiet words, their presence a shield against the indifference of the town. From the diner's door, the teenager who had filmed earlier stepped out. His phone was gone, tucked deep into his pocket. In his hands, he clutched a takeout bag, the string tied awkwardly with a scrap of receipt paper. His shoulders hunched as he crossed the street, each step hesitant. Captain Brooks noticed first, but he didn't move. He let the boy come on his own. The teenager stopped at the edge of the curb, shifting his weight. His voice cracked as he spoke. Sir, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have filmed. I didn't know. He held out the bag, both hands shaking slightly. This is on the house, please. Jack studied him for a long moment. Ranger's ears twitched, sensing his pause. Then Jack reached out, steady and deliberate, and took the bag. Appreciate it, kid, he said evenly, no sharpness in his tone. The boy let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Ranger sniffed the bag once, then thumped his tail softly against Jack's boot as if to seal the exchange. The Marines watched in silence, a small smile flickering across Brooks's face. One of the younger men murmured, Takes guts to walk back out here. The teenager gave a quick nod, then retreated toward the diner, his steps lighter than before. Jack looked down at Ranger, who gazed back with steady brown eyes. Guess some folks can still learn, huh, boy? Ranger's tail wagged once, slow and certain. The quiet agreement of a partner who had seen the worst of men and still trusted the best in them. Within a week, change began to ripple through Harbor Point. The Harbor Grill that once turned Jack and Ranger away now carried a new sign in its front window. We proudly welcome veterans and their service companions. Beneath the bold letters hung a framed photograph of military working dogs, black and white images of messenger dogs from World War II beside color photos of modern K-9 units in Iraq and Afghanistan. Diners stopped to look before stepping inside, some pausing longer than they expected. Word spread quickly. Local veterans groups shared the story, neighbors repeated it at coffee shops, and within days, the diner that had felt cold now hummed with a new purpose. Jack noticed the difference the first time he returned. The same waitress who once delivered his water with formality now greeted him with a smile, sliding a small water dish under the table for Ranger. A basket of dog treats sat near the counter, discreet but ready. On the house, she said softly, as Ranger's tail tapped against the floor. Families brought children to the diner not just for meals but to see Ranger, to hear stories of loyalty and service. An older man with a ball cap embroidered USS Midway shook Jack's hand firmly, thanking him for paving the way. It wasn't loud or flashy. No speeches, no parade. Just a steady shift in how people looked at Jack and at veterans like him. What once was an awkward silence had turned into nods of respect, warm greetings, and a corner booth that was quietly understood to be his. Jack sat there one evening, Ranger stretched at his feet, and felt something he hadn't in a long time: belonging. On a brisk Friday evening, Harbor Grill filled faster than usual. The smell of roasted chicken and fresh bread mingled with the buzz of voices. But this wasn't an ordinary dinner rush, it was the first Veterans Night, a new tradition the owner had promised after the incident with Jack. The corner booth carried a small American flag and a plaque that read, "Jack and Ranger never forgot." Jack arrived quietly, Ranger at his side. The chatter softened as people noticed. A little boy clutching a hand-drawn card in crayon approached first, his mother watching nervously. "For Ranger," the boy whispered, holding it out. Ranger sniffed, then gently nudged the card with his nose, tail brushing against Jack's boot. The boy grinned as though he'd met a hero. Midway through the evening, the diner's lights dimmed slightly. The owner stepped forward with a small box in her hands. "Tonight, we honor one of our own," she said, her voice steady. She knelt beside Ranger, fastening a medallion to his vest. The words on the medal gleamed in the light, "Four-legged warrior." Applause filled the room. Ranger blinked at the noise, then sneezed, shaking his head with a puzzled look. Laughter rippled through the crowd, the kind of warm laughter that eased heavy hearts. Jack chuckled, rubbing the dog's ears. "Guess he didn't rehearse that part," he said, drawing more smiles. As the evening continued, veterans swapped stories at tables. Children listened wide-eyed, and neighbors leaned closer, learning what sacrifice looked like beyond headlines and parades. Jack sat back, hand resting on Ranger's back, his eyes shining in the glow of community. For the first time in years, he wasn't just a man with a service dog. He was part of something bigger again. The following week, Harbor Grill hosted its second Veterans Night. The room glowed with warmth. Families crowded into booths, veterans swapped stories over coffee, and Ranger rested calmly under Jack's table, his vest shining with the new medal. Midway through the evening, the diner door opened and the teenager who had once filmed Jack entered with his mother. She hesitated at the threshold, clutching a small tin of cookies in both hands. The chatter in the diner softened as people recognized her, the same woman who had whispered harshly the day Jack was asked to leave. Jack noticed but said nothing. Ranger lifted his head, sensing the shift. The teenager approached first, his voice quiet but steady. "Mr. Morgan, I wanted you to know I deleted the video. My brother just enlisted last month. I get it now." His mother stepped forward, cheeks flushed. She placed the tin on the table. "I misjudged you, sir. I thought I was protecting my son. Turns out I was teaching him the wrong lesson." Her voice trembled, but she stood tall. "I signed up to volunteer at the VA center. I want to do better." For a long moment, the diner held its breath. Jack studied her face, then glanced at Ranger, who wagged his tail once as if casting the deciding vote. Jack gave a small nod. "Takes courage to admit when you're wrong." "That counts too." Relief washed over the woman's features. Around the room, quiet approval rippled, nods, soft murmurs, the kind of acknowledgement that spoke louder than applause. The boy smiled faintly, resting a hand on Ranger's head. For the first time, Jack felt the fracture between them close, not with grand gestures, but with simple honesty. By the third month, Veterans Night at Harbor Grill had become a fixture on the town calendar. The little seafood diner, once just another stop along the harbor, now glowed with a sense of purpose. Families arrived early, veterans in ball caps embroidered with ship names, young reservists in crisp uniforms, and neighbors who simply wanted to listen. The walls displayed new additions. Framed photos of local servicemen, a letter from Captain Brooks sent from overseas, and the plaque for Jack and Ranger's booth. Children pressed their noses to the glass cases, pointing at medals and old photographs. Jack noticed the change each time he walked through the door. Where once eyes turned away, now heads lifted in greeting. The waitress no longer carried just menus. She carried water bowls for service dogs, setting them down with the same care as a plate of food. Ranger had become something of a celebrity. Kids would crouch near the booth, asking permission to pet him, waiting for Jack's quiet nod. Ranger accepted the attention with patience, tail wagging gently, his steady eyes reminding everyone that loyalty doesn't need words. One snowy evening, a group of high school students set up near the window, playing a few songs on acoustic guitars. The soft chords filled the diner, blending with the low hum of conversation. Jack leaned back in his seat, Ranger stretched at his feet, and allowed himself a rare smile. He thought of all the places where silence had once greeted him. Now laughter and music surrounded him, not because the town pitied him, but because it finally saw him. Harbor Grill had become more than a diner. It was a gathering place, a reminder that respect isn't a banner flown once a year. It's lived out one night, one meal, one handshake at a time. By spring, Veterans Night had grown beyond anyone's expectations. The diner's owner now kept a calendar of speakers and volunteers, neighbors who wanted to help, veterans who wanted to share their stories. One evening, as Jack settled into his corner booth, Ranger at his feet, a familiar face stepped forward. It was the boy's mother, the same woman who had once pulled her son away and whispered sharply in the past. This time she wore an apron carrying pitchers of iced tea to a long table of veterans. When the rush slowed, she approached Jack's booth. Ranger's ears flicked as she came near, but his tail wagged softly, remembering. "I thought I'd stop by," she said, smoothing the apron nervously. "Didn't want to just show up once and disappear. I signed up to coordinate volunteers for these dinners." She glanced around the room, then back to Jack. "It's my way of making it right." Jack studied her, his weathered hands folded on the table. For a moment he said nothing, then he gave a short nod. "Takes more than words." "Good to see you're following through." Her shoulders eased, relief visible in her smile. "Thank you," she said simply before returning to the crowd. The boy trailed after her, carrying a box of thank you cards from the local school. He grinned sheepishly at Jack. "She's better at this than I am." Jack chuckled, the sound low but warm. "Teamwork's a good habit to learn early." The boy placed the box on the table and gave Ranger a gentle pat. Ranger leaned into it, tail brushing Jack's boot. Around them, the diner hummed with life, neighbors laughing, children delivering handmade cards, veterans shaking hands. Harbor Grill had become more than a restaurant. It was a living reminder that even mistakes could be turned into bridges if people were willing to walk across. Winter gave way to spring, and the harbor air softened with the scent of salt and blooming lilacs. On a clear evening, Jack made his way to Harbor Grill, Ranger steady at his side. The diner's windows glowed warmly against the dusk, the little flag by the door stirring in the breeze. Inside, the Friday night crowd was lively. Children darted between tables with cards in hand, veterans in caps swapped stories, and neighbors waved across the room. The corner booth, the one that had once been contested, was waiting, a small American flag and a plaque marking it as Jack and Ranger's place. Jack eased into the seat, his stiff leg reminding him of every mile behind him. Ranger settled under the table, chin resting on Jack's boot as always. The waitress brought coffee without asking, along with a small dish of water for Ranger. Jack reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out three things: the Bravo Company coin, the folded letter from a fallen comrade, and the medal hanging from Ranger's vest. He laid them on the table, his fingers brushing each one in turn. They weren't trophies. They were reminders of survival, of loyalty, of sacrifice. Ranger shifted, pressing closer against Jack's leg as if anchoring him to the moment. Jack rested a hand on the dog's head. "We did all right, didn't we, boy?" Ranger's tail wagged once, slow and steady. Around them, life went on, laughter, conversation, the clink of silverware. But something had changed. Jack no longer felt invisible. The town no longer looked past him. Respect wasn't in parades or speeches. It was in the way people now paused, nodded, or simply made space for him and Ranger. As the night wound down, Jack leaned back, the flag outside catching the last rays of daylight. For once, he didn't wonder if anyone would remember. He knew they would.